So today I'll be going over the conventional deadlift and how I like to perform the lift. I did this video a few months ago, but I was new to video editing and I didn't think the production was all that great. So I'm going to make another one. I think it's time, and we'll see if my value has gotten any better. So for starters, I stand with a really close stance with my feet together, pointed out at about 30 degrees. I want you to try standing in this position with your toes pointed forward. And while you're standing straight up, and I want you to tighten your glutes and your hamstrings. And while you have your glutes and your hamstrings contracted, turn your feet out about 30 degrees and feel the activation in your glutes and your hamstrings. Feel how much more that muscle is engaged when you turn your feet out. By having your feet turned out slightly, it helps to engage that muscle group, but it also prevents your shins from hitting the bar when you're basically bending over to engage it. For most people, the bar is going to be across the center of their feet, so basically you want the bar to split your center of gravity so that your feet are planted firmly in the ground. And depending on your body type, how tall you are, how long your limbs are, when you bend over to pick the bar up, your shins will hit the bar and move it out of the way. So by turning your feet out slightly, it basically gives your shins more room to work with. So you get two things. You get extra glute activation, and it gets your legs out of the way of the bar path. So now here I'm demonstrating addressing the bar. The goal is to move the bar against gravity, which means the bar is going to be moving in a straight up and down line optimally with no movement in the lateral direction. This removes any efficiency from the lift because you're basically only pulling against gravity itself. So how far do you want to be bent over? You want to be bent over to where your shoulders are going to be above the bar and you can pick the bar up in a straight up and down line. So that means your back angle is going to be different depending on your body height, your type, that sort of thing. Because I'm almost 5'10", and the way my proportions are, for me, this means my shoulders are slightly ahead of the bar. That way, so by the time I reach down and grab the bar, I'm basically over it a little bit. But if you're a shorter person, you might be back a little bit farther than me. Or if you're a really tall person, you might be really far over the bar. Lastly, before I pick the bar up, I also want to make sure that I'm rotating my shoulders back so that my shoulders are in line with my spine. Next thing I want to do is demonstrate taking the slack out of the bar. And all that means is before I engage or perform the lift, I'm going to put tension on the bar until there's no play in it. That means that you're not able to wiggle it around and it's not loose and sloppy. It's nice and tight, and it's exerting pressure against the weight. So I just mentioned rotating your shoulders back so that they're aligned with the spine. So let me over-exaggerate that and show you what it looks like. Basically, when I grab the bar, all I'm doing is I'm rotating my shoulders until my chest is sticking out proudly. I'm not pushing my chest out or puffing it out. I'm just rolling the shoulders back until everything's aligned and the core is tightened. And when it's tightened, it should feel much like it does when you're doing the barbell squat. So I'm going over my basic setup. To recap, I have my feet together, turned out slightly. I basically engage my core, tighten everything up. I break my butt like I'm doing the squat, and I bend back until my shoulders are over the bar to where I can reach down and pick the bar up in a straight up and down line. I've got my shoulders turned out, and I take the slack out of the bar before I pull. Some people are going to lift different than others. For me, what I generally like to do is when I break the floor, I generate as much force as possible, and I try to accelerate the bar into the standing position. Some people are very fast off the floor. Some people are slow, methodical grinders. Some people split the difference, and they just have nice metronomic speed up and down. For today's program, I do 3 warm-up sets and 3 working sets, with one of my working sets being an AMRAP at 495. I was able to get that for 6 reps, which is pretty good for me. A lot of different programs you can use, but at my age, I try to stay away from a heavy amount of total volume. I try to keep the total volume low, but I really ramp up the intensity. I was really hyped up when I did this set, but the yell at the end of it is actually a joke. I don't normally do that. I rarely show any emotion while I'm lifting. So normally after my AMRAP set, I would go into accessories, but I was feeling really good today, so I decided to work up to a heavy single at 465 pounds. And then I dropped down to, I believe, 425 for 6 or 7 singles, somewhere in there. I typically do 2 accessories, and today, and I like to switch them up. I don't do the same accessory movements every week. If I have something that's really working for me, I'll stick with it. I've really been doing a lot of dead rows and a lot of barbell rows, stuff like that. Well, today I was messing around and I decided to combine them. I was doing dead rows for 1 rep, and then a deadlift for the 2nd rep for 1 complete rep of a 2-part movement, but I was doing them from a deficit while standing on a 35-pound plate. And after I did a few sets of those, I did just standard cable pulls, but what I did was I switched things up and I went with super high repetition. I think I was doing sets of 50. And now you might ask, like, well, why were you doing that? And I don't know, just like the other accessory where I don't even have a name for it. Just sometimes I like to play around with different rep ranges and just see what kind of pump or feel that I have afterwards. I do a lot of work outside of the standard rep range programming by how I feel. When I'm prepping for a competition, I'm way more strict with my program and exercise choices. But I just competed and I have a month or 2 to fart around before I start training for my next meet. So now's the time to fiddle around with things and see if I can incorporate anything new into my routine that I might use down the road. So a lot of what I'm doing for as far as accessories goes is just a little bit of experimental stuff. Since we're all built differently, tall, small, skinny, fat, long legs, long torso, short torso, whatever, etc., we're all going to be set up a little bit differently, so you can't necessarily correct somebody's form just by looking at how far up their butt is or how far back they're sitting on their heels. There's 2 things you can use to pretty much correct any deadlift, and that's whether or not the bar moves in a straight up and down line and whether or not the feet are firmly planted. I was feeling frisky, so I decided to throw 1 more accessory in, and I was just farting around with those deadlift row combinations I like, and I was just seeing if I could do them at a deficit, if that would add anything to it. So again, if you're looking to help somebody with their deadlift and you're trying to diagnose whether or not they're having issues, perhaps you think their butt's too high up or they don't have their back at the correct angle, take a camera, put it on the side, and video the bar path. Watch the bar go and see if it's moving in a straight up and down line. If it's not, then you can start making corrections. Well, hopefully you were able to get something out of this video. If you were, this helped you in any way, and you'd like to see more of these videos, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. I think I've gained about 20 subscribers in the last couple of weeks, so I'm really happy about that. Here I'm showing off a little bit, showing off the old man's physique, and the reason why I'm doing that is because I just want people to know that, especially guys my age, that my build is really attainable. Like I do have better than average genetics. Like even if I didn't work out at all, I'm still a fairly stocky guy. But I think that with a little bit of consistency and moving some heavy weights on a regular basis, you can get my build fairly easily. I have been working out for quite a while, so it's not something that's going to happen overnight. And I've over the years managed to get my diet fairly dialed in. I don't eat the cleanest, but I do watch my total caloric intake. And then of course the other thing is I'm a fairly obsessive lifter, so I rarely miss training. I'm not one of those guys that I mean, I love it. I live in my garage. I absolutely love training. And before I had my garage set up, I lived in a gym. The hardest part for me on some days was just the drive over there, just getting there. And ever since I've had my own equipment, that's just not a problem anymore. So I think the optimal setup for most people, if they have the means, is to have some equipment at their home so that they can get training in those days where they just don't want to go across town. But it would be also to have a good gym membership at a place that's got good people in it, some place that accommodates your style of training, whether you're in CrossFit or powerlifting. You don't want to be a power lifter at an LA Fitness or one of these small commercial joints. You don't want to be a CrossFitter at a powerlifting gym. Well, ours has some of those, but you want to be with people that are going to encourage you and help you to progress in the sport of your choice. Something to consider.